What coaching changes could we expect from the Florida Gators for 2025?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. And I will say this right now because I know how people can get. This is speculative, okay? Purely speculative about what changes we can expect or should expect or can see. And I will say this one as well. First thing we're talking about is an offensive coordinator. That's the thing that we've been talking about for Florida Gators fans for a while now. And again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I think the Florida Gators need a play-calling offensive coordinator. I specify a play-calling offensive coordinator because I don't care if you're bringing in someone who's a scheme guru. I don't care. Like, I would have loved Brennan Marion. Congratulations for getting the job at Sac State. You're going to do great there. I don't need someone who's going to come in and reinvent the wheel with this team, right? This is your championship window. The scheme is fine. I've told you this a million times. The scheme's fine. It is. I know you may disagree, but it's perfectly fine. The play calling stinks. That's the issue. Okay? So the scheme's fine. Play calling stinks. Billy Napier, just getting someone that's better at calling plays than him would make this team so much better and raise the ceiling for this team so much higher. On top of that, it is, and I'm going to exclude the bowl game from this because the bowl game should not count because we know why there were so many issues there. But pretty consistently throughout this year and throughout Billy Napier's entire tenure, the Florida Gators have burned timeouts to avoid delay of game penalties, to avoid these silly little things, right? The 12 men, 10 men, the delay of games, the play call just coming in late and then not being able to get situated and that turning into a train wreck. We've seen that far too often. Billy Napier hiring a play calling offensive coordinator would allow him to focus on more of the head coach things. Avoid a game like Miami where your team does not show up. Avoid a game like Texas A&M where your team does not show up. You avoid the games where your team does not show up if you are allowed to focus more on getting them ready to be football players. That's the biggest reason Billy Napier needs an offensive coordinator, right? And I will say this as well. I would love to say that there is going to be a hire here. I was told they've been speaking with people, and I know that the rumors that come out all the time are, Cade Bell's always thrown out there, and Garrett Riley's been thrown out there in the past couple weeks, and I saw Lincoln Riley on Twitter earlier this week, and there's going to be a bunch of names thrown out there. We can have a conversation in a couple days about actually getting that done and talking about potential OC hires. But I will say also that last year we were told, hey, Billy Napier needs to hire an offensive coordinator, and that didn't happen either. So this year, I'm not getting my hopes up as much. I do believe it more this year than last year. But again, I've been hurt before. I'm skeptical. On the defensive side of the ball, the rumor for months has been that Ron Roberts would be gone, right? Again, rumor. This is speculative, but the rumor is that Ron Roberts will be gone. I also said, I think it was November 30th, I sent a message to the Locked On Gators Insider program. I said, hey, I think Austin Armstrong is going to be gone. That happened. And insiders knew about it 2 weeks before it happened. So just saying. That being said, you need to replace them, right? If Ron Roberts does leave, you need to replace him because you would have lost both of your defensive coordinators. Personally, I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing in someone that is also from that Ron Roberts coaching tree. Like, and I'm talking big game hunting here, right? If we're talking about someone from the Ron Roberts coaching tree, I'm headed to Oxford, Mississippi right now. I'm dialing it up and I'm saying, hey, Pete Golding, you want to come to Gainesville? Pete Golding he is from the Ron Roberts tree. At least that's how I look at him because he was at Delta State under Ron Roberts like 15 years ago. He spent like 6 years there. So a lot of time under Ron Roberts. The scheme is very similar. Think that Pete Golding has, I don't want to say a better pass rush plan, but as far as the whole, edge rushers hate dropping in coverage as often as they do, which I understand. You understand that, hey, we got to drop in coverage every now and then. It's part of the scheme. But I do also understand the side saying, hey, dropping in coverage 30% of my pass defense snaps is not exactly what I want to do. So I get that. You could also look for someone with experience in the system, like a guy who was here last year in Jay Bateman, someone that there are people who believe he is a candidate. I'm sure there are also outside candidates that we can talk about in the coming days, or maybe not the coming days, whenever we get confirmation of Ron Roberts staying or leaving, we can have a conversation about potential replacements. But personally, Pete Golding would probably be at the top of my list. I said when people were talking about firing Billy and hiring Lane, I was saying, hey, bring Pete Golding with you. Like just bring him with you and you're right back on track, right? A lot of the players can run this system. He's a good schemer, good play caller, in my opinion. Go get him. And then, of course, yes, there's people who talk about Jay Bateman as a potential add there. Little skeptical just because of how messy his departure got, which if he is the hire or if he is a legit candidate, we'll go a bit further into that. But yeah, coordinator changes back to back years for defense wouldn't be awesome. However, I'm cool with it. In this instance, in an offensive coordinator, I think you need to hire one. We will talk about some other offensive assistants that could be getting dust boot out of Gainesville next on Locked On Gators. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W, and I love betting on which players will score a touchdown. Usually, I bet it against the bad teams, like Monday Night Football. Knew the Packers are going to blow out the Saints, so bet on Josh Jacobs to score a touchdown. Why not, right? Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. And when we look at offensive assistants that could be leaving this coaching staff, there's really two that I look at, right? I don't think Jabbar Jalouf's going anywhere, nor do I want him to go anywhere. I think he's earned his keep. I think he's earned the right to be here. I know, he doesn't land 5 stars all the time. Every running back he gets contributes. I'm cool with it. One guy that I do think could be getting the boot is wide receiver coach Billy Gonzales. His contract is up, and I do believe that they're going to move on from him, and I'm not shaken up about it. Look, I think Billy Gonzales, pretty good developer. I do think he's a good wide receiver coach. I don't think he's a great recruiter, right? And I know that there's people that are like, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III. Like, look at the receiver class. Yeah, look at the receiver class. But look at Billy Gonzales' usual receiver recruiting, and it's not often that he's bringing in these elite blue chip players on his own, right? It's a lot of times been for other reasons. Vernell Brown III was a legacy that wanted to go to Florida. There was a very clear indication he wanted to go to Florida. He's there. More importantly, I don't know if they go outside for the hire at receiver coach if they get rid of Billy Gonzales. But if they are sticking internally, there's two assistants there. There's Chad Lucas and there's Coach Decker, David Decker. Chad Lucas is the guy that you should swing on, right? He's the guy that you take your shot on. You say, hey, you're going to be our wide receiver coach. As far as recruiting goes, and here's another thing, a lot of the assistants can recruit. That's just how it is. A lot of the assistants work on recruiting, and they talk to kids, and they build these relationships with these players. It happens a lot. Okay, so Chad Lucas is a guy that they should swing on. Billy Napier is a wide receiver coach at his core. Like, he'd be able to help there if you don't feel like Chad Lucas is doing well enough. I think he would be fine. So there's that. And then there's the offensive line. Those are the only two spots that we're talking about. I've said for a month or so now that I think they part ways with Rob Sale. Have said for even longer than that they should part ways with Rob Sale. I think what happens is that Rob Sale leaves for whatever role he's going to go to next. And then Jonathan DeCoster gets promoted to be the offensive line coach. That's just, again, this is me speculating. But when you look at, and this goes back again for a month or so that I noticed it, when you look at what the Florida Gators were recruiting on the offensive line, and then you see the primary recruiter and the secondary recruiter, a lot of the guys that Florida was actually in on, it was Jonathan DeCoster as the primary and Rob Sale as the secondary. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that you could be able to look at that and say, hey, maybe there's a plan, right? Maybe their plan is we're going to have Jonathan DeCoster be our offensive line coach. And so he should be the primary recruiter. Or Rob Sale is going to be leaving. Jonathan DeCoster will be here, even if he's not the offensive line coach. So he should be the primary recruiter of the bunch. It would make sense if the guy that is going to be coaching these kids is the guy that's primarily recruiting these kids. There is also a possibility that is less fun, a possibility that I don't like as much, but I will accept as a possibility. Again, not that I will accept and like it, that I will accept that it may be a possibility, that it may be part of the plan there, but that because Jonathan DeCoster has been listed as the primary recruiter on a lot of guys, which is, again, how I'm basing a lot of this, but if Jonathan DeCoster is just the better recruiter, and so they want Jonathan DeCoster to be more of the recruiting offensive line coach, and Rob Sale is more of the on-field guy, maybe that's a possibility, but I do think that is the least likely scenario in this situation. Just because I don't think it makes a ton of sense to have one offensive line coach do all the recruiting and sell the university and sell this football team and sell this coaching staff to kids, only for them to not be anyone that works with you, right? Because that just doesn't make a ton of sense to go, yeah, I'm going to make sure your kid's right. I'm going to make sure this. I'm going to make sure that. And then once they get on campus, you've got nothing to do with them, right? It just doesn't make sense to me there. So that's why I think it's a possibility, and I can see them taking that approach, but just from the outside looking in, it doesn't sound like it makes a ton of sense, right? At least that's from my perspective there. Either way, I do think that Rob Sale will be gone. That's been a thing that we've been talking about for a long while there. But yeah, that's how at least I look at this offensive line, this offensive coaching staff shaking up. I don't think that you see a ton of turnover, but I do think if we're going to wide receiver coach and offensive line coach, we'll probably be mixed up in there. And maybe, this is again purely speculative, but hopefully Florida will have, hear me out, crazy, zany idea. One offensive line coach in 2025. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? We are going to flip to the defensive side for the rest of today's episode next on Locked On Gators. I don't know if you like going to sporting events, but if you do, Game Time is the place to go. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, and that means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And if you want to catch a bowl game, last-minute tickets, great prices on Game Time. All I'm saying, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time, baby. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And now flipping to the defensive side of the ball for potential departures. I think when you look at the defensive coaching staff and you look at the changes made last year, you nailed defensive line and secondary, right? Gerald Chapman had the defensive line assaulting quarterbacks for the back half of the season. Now you're going to have that whole offseason with him, and you will have what has already been done. So if Gerald Chapman can get a guy like Caleb Banks to take the next step, then we can have the first-round pick conversation, which we had briefly toward the end of the season, but my point was always, I don't think that that's a possibility that's going to be happening, right? So there's that, but Gerald Chapman nailed it. A lot of youth on that line. Could get better. Secondary, Will Harris nailed it, right? He's done a great job. 2 top 10 safeties in the country are coming to Gainesville for the 2025 class. The secondary really played better. I mean, they were destroyed with injuries. Absolutely demolished to the point where you had guys changing positions. You had walk-ons coming in. It was crazy. And once they found a rhythm, again, about the midway point, outside of that Texas game, they were pretty lights out. That Texas game was horrible. All those injuries piled up, and it was very clear there was not enough communication. Things just kept breaking down, and there were so many busted plays. But outside of that Texas game in the back half, pretty damn good secondary play, right? Then we look at what potential changes there might be. And we'll start with linebacker, right? And the reason that we are starting with linebacker is because earlier in the show, we talked about the rumor being that Ron Roberts is gone off the coaching staff. If that is true, then Florida will be looking for a linebacker coach because Ron Roberts coaches linebackers here. So if that rumor is true, then Ron Roberts will be gone and you will be looking for a linebacker coach. I do think that most of the names we've talked about, I mean, both of the names that we talked about today, because we've only talked about Pete Golding and Jay Bateman as possibilities. And there are others that people try to float in there. Not Charlie Strong. Don't say Charlie Strong, okay? No. Stop it. But every other person that we've talked about should be able to handle linebacker coaching duties, right? Jay Bateman coached linebackers here in 2023. Pete Golding been a linebacker coach his career. So when we talk about replacing a DC and replacing a linebacker coach, right now, that's the same guy. And it wouldn't shock me at all if next year that's a different guy, but the same guy doing both as well. I do think that you need to get someone that's proven at developing the position and coaching linebacker. I do think that now that has more of a premium for whoever you hire because you've got so much youth and potential in that room right now. You've got Pup Howard and Jaden Robinson both entering year 3, Pup with year 2 with the program, but both entering year 3. So you've got Pup and Jaden Robinson there. You've got Miles Graham and Aaron Childs just finishing up their freshman year. You've got Ty Jackson, Miles Johnson coming in. We don't know if Shamar's coming back or not, but that could play a part in it as well. But I think right now is your window where it's not just your window because you have DJ Lagway as your starter. It's your window because right now you've got all the youth that's getting ready to contribute. And for Florida at linebacker, those guys developing is massive, important for your defense. Linebackers in coverage, massively important. Linebackers defending the run, massively important. I really think that I think we've gotten to the point where people are underrating linebacker play. I know that it's like, yeah, they're the least valuable position on defense. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. I think they're very important to what you've got to do. Another position to talk about that I think there should be a coaching staff change is the edge room, outside linebackers, whatever you want to call it. I have not been very shy about this. I don't think Mike Peterson's a very good coach as an edge coach. I just don't. There's been almost no development as far as a pass rusher on the edge under Mike Peterson. And we've seen multiple guys go out and perform better after leaving. You can maybe give Mike P the, credit for Princely Umanmielen, right? Because Princely was here for a couple of years. Princely had a good year here before leaving and going to Ole Miss and having a better year. But you talk about like Antoine Powell-Ryland. He left here and got significantly better. That wasn't a coincidence that he left here, okay? I will also say this because I think it's very important to at least acknowledge that I've said I'm not a huge Mike P fan, right? I don't think he's a very good edge coach. Jack Pyburn's dad brought up on Twitter when he was going on his little tantrum. Do any of you find it odd that Peterson can't keep anyone in his room? I will call partial BS on that. I think he was just trying to find a scapegoat. And here's the thing, as far as Pyburn's concerned, anything his dad said has no value. Because Pyburn went out and basically was like, yeah, like I had these demands. I wanted to play more snaps. I wanted to play more pass rushing downs. I wanted to rotate less, all these things. So, yeah, I don't care what his dad said. I didn't care what his dad said before, honestly, because his dad was a large reason that those demands got out anyway. So that was stupid. But either way, I call BS on that. I don't think that Jack Pyburn was like, oh yeah, Mike Peterson's the reason I'm not a great pass rusher. No, I disagree with that. But again, I'm not a big Mike P fan. I just think it's stupid to try to pass the blame to Mike P when one of the reasons that the edge room has lost a couple players this offseason is other programs offering money. One of the guys that left in the edge room got the money from the program that offered him and tampered. The rest, not so much. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.